Explosive weapons in Fortnite used to be such a staple of the game, but over the last couple years, we've sort of seen a fall from grace of these explosive weapons. And honestly, while the majority of explosive weapons are pretty good, unfortunately, there's a fair share of them that are also just terrible. And that's what we're going to look over today in this video. We're going to revisit some of Fortnite's worst explosive weapons and items of all time, just those items that you should really just be avoiding at all costs. If you go on to like this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop if you'd like to support me, and let's just get right into this. This video will not just consist of weapons, but also items and throwables, and the first item on this list is grenades. I don't know what happened to grenades. I don't know why they needed to do this, but they nerfed grenades from 100 down to 40 damage, and yes, while I will say in certain seasons, nade stacking was absolutely busted, and 100 damage may have been too much, but 40 is just awful. I mean, 40 damage from a grenade is brutal. To have to hit somebody 3 times with a grenade to just kill them, just do 120 white damage, is awful. Now, look, I know what you're gonna say, you know, they're not used to kill people, they're used to, you know, do damage to structures and break down walls, and fair enough. But again, you're going to want to do damage, and 40 damage is just not cutting it at all. This is one of my least favorite nerfs ever in Fortnite, and in my opinion, just totally ruined one of the most OG items in the game's history. If they decide to bring back regular grenades, 40 damage is not going to cut it. It needs to be, in my opinion, double that even at 80 damage. And while we're talking about items, I might as well just throw the bottle rockets in here as well. I think that there's an argument to be made that bottle rockets are the worst item in the game's history. Why would I ever want to use this item? Genuinely, like, why would I ever want to use this? If you don't know how bottle rockets work, you would just throw them down and they would launch, like, you know, fireworks that were explosives onto one specific part of the map that, like, you aimed at. I just don't see a use for this item. The only time I could ever see this being useful is if someone's in a box and someone's reviving and you don't want to push them, so you just throw a bottle rocket, right? Even in that situation, just push them, dude. Just push them. If you hear a bottle rocket being placed, you just move 2 feet to the right and the entire purpose of the weapon is just gone. If I keep talking about the bottle rockets, I may have an aneurysm, so I'm gonna stop, but they are awful. And not to mention extremely bad damage. Next, and I know this might feel like a little bit of a cheap pick because it's an exotic weapon, but I gotta go with the Big Chill here. If you watched either of my videos where I looked at exotics, specifically the worst exotics of all time, or when I just ranked every single exotic, the Big Chill ranked dead last in both. Contrary to the previous 2 items that we've seen so far, I actually think the Big Chill does have a pretty solid use, right? If you want mobility, just shoot at your feet, you get the ice cubes on your feet. Or I remember they were broken in ranked for a time period because they could actually hit people through walls, right? So I believe they were good for like a competitive tournament or 2, but a grenade launcher that does no damage. It literally does no damage. I can't get my head around that. I mean, just give it a little bit of damage, something 50 damage, but no, 0. Just turns their feet snowy, which can mess up their movement and maybe give you the edge in a fight or 2, but just too many niche situations for this to work, and I don't think it's good at all. Hence why it ranked dead last in both those videos. Next, we have the guided missile, and I just briefly touched on this item in my video where I kind of looked at some weapons that may just never come back, and the guided missile is one of those. The guided missile hasn't been in the game for like 2,000 days, and I'm not really sure why. They just kind of never bring back the guided missile, and it may just be for the sole reason that this weapon doesn't have a place in a game like Fortnite anymore. 4, 5, 6 years ago when people couldn't build a 1x1, yeah, maybe the guided missile would have a place, but now as soon as you hear the guided missile, just build a 1x1, you're good. That's it. Again, I think it just boils down to the point that there's just not a place in the game for this weapon anymore. What I will say is I do believe that this is probably the best weapon so far on this list, but again, let's be real, that's not saying much. Look, like I said, I think the guided missile is a really neat idea, and I would love to see it come back, maybe reworked, but I just don't know that it has a place in the current state of Fortnite. In zero build, that's a different story. I could see the guided missile being kind of useful, but in build, I don't think so. Even at the time of its launch, all the way back in Season 3 and Season 4, I was not a big fan of the guided missile. I just didn't think it was great. I didn't like leaving my body kind of idle, right? Obviously, if you know, you shoot the guided missile, and you have to control the missile, so your body just kind of sits there. That being said, though, it was a really fun weapon, but unfortunately, just has to be at the bottom here. Next, we have one of the worst items of all time. I mean, not even just worst explosives. That's the recycler. And yes, it does count as an explosive weapon. I looked it up. Look, I have ranted about this weapon so many times in multiple videos, so if you guys have watched those videos, I'll spare your ears a little bit. This weapon is awful. It's really just crushed by the area of effect. It does no damage outside of like maybe 2 to 3 meters away from the person, right? If you're using explosive weapon, you would expect a bigger area of effect. This, you basically get no splash damage. You're assuming you're going to hit them head on. It's slow, it's clunky. Again, the only redeeming factor about this weapon is the fact that you essentially can have unlimited ammo because you just, you know, vacuum up a bush or something and there's your ammo, you know what I'm saying? Very weak damage from a very bad season. It's no surprise some of the worst weapons of all time came from Chapter 2, Season 6. I absolutely despise that season, and I despise the Recycler. Next, I'm gonna go with a weapon that I feel like actually often goes forgotten in terms of Fortnite weapons. That's the Proximity Grenade Launcher. And I will say, this is definitely the best item or weapon on this list, so I think if you're kind of upset at this being on here, I understand. And this is such a cool weapon design. The idea that you could shoot an explosive and it would explode when it was near them is really cool. The problem here is I don't know that you could even really consider this an explosive weapon. The grenade, or I guess the rocket, would only explode if it was near somebody, right? So if someone's sitting in the top of a 1x1, right? You shoot the bottom of that 1x1, that grenade will not explode. But if you shoot it at the top of the 1x1, right? Let's say there's no ceiling on it and they're up top of it, then it will explode and hit them. So you can't go into using this weapon thinking that it's like an explosive weapon, you know what I'm saying? Because you're not going to get that, right? You're not going to be able to break a ton of builds. But if you go into it with a little bit of a different mindset, then I think you could have a lot of success with this weapon. It's a really cool idea. Again, the fact that you could just shoot a grenade near somebody, and if it was near them, it would just automatically explode. That's really cool. My main like real gripe with this weapon is just how slow the projectile travels. You can see and hear this thing from miles away. If I remember correctly, it had like a blinking red light on it. If you saw that thing anywhere, just put up a wall and it would just bounce off the wall. But, you know, look, in my opinion, would I rather have a rocket launcher over the proximity grenade launcher? Yeah, of course. But I would rather have the proximity over, let's just say, regular grenades, bottle rockets, the big chill, that type of stuff. So while I do acknowledge that this weapon can be good sometimes, I think it's in the bottom tier of explosive weapons, and it hasn't been in the game for forever, to be honest with you. Besides Season OG, I believe it was an OG. And finally, I was stuck between basically two items here. That was either the Paper Bomb Kunai or the Proximity Mine, and I didn't want to put both of them on. I wanted to keep this list kind of even on weapons and items, and so I'm going to go with the Proximity Mine. While yes, the Paper Bomb Kunai was really bad, I think you got a little more utility out of it than the Proximity Mine. Again, I feel like the Proximity Mine is an example of one of those weapons and items that just don't belong in Fortnite, and that's for multiple reasons. I mean, when would you ever realistically use this, right? If you're going to throw it down and just sit by it and camp, I guess fair enough, but that's not how I like to play, so for me, that was out of the picture. Or I guess you could just like throw it behind a door and then just like kind of run away and play and just hope you get a free kill, I guess, but you're not going to collect any loot. It doesn't really benefit you. And of course, in a build fight, you're just never going to use this. You're never going to throw down a proximity mine and hope it does something, right? I don't see a place for this. I honestly can't name a good thing about this item. I guess the fact that if you do hit somebody with it, it kind of marks them, right? Like the shakedown effect. But man, this is a tough item. This is a really bad item, and there's a reason why I don't think it's ever come back since Chapter 2, Season 2 it was, I believe. If this item never came back, I don't think anybody would really care, to be honest with you. And that is my list for some of Fortnite's worst explosives of all time. Let me know in the comment section below, are there any I missed? Did I nail some? And let me know if you guys would like to see revisiting some of Fortnite's best explosives, because there are a couple absolutely insane explosive weapons. Like, comment, subscribe, and with all that being said, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.